Okay, so there are two different phases of rule changes. We've got one phase that takes effect March 20th of 2026. And this is actually more on our part that we are having enhanced fraud monitoring from us at a bank level, but we'll talk about how that's going to impact you. And then we have new required company entry descriptions that does impact you directly as originators that we'll have to take note of. And then looking ahead to June 19th of 2026, our originators, which is you, are required to establish and maintain risk-based fraud monitoring processes on your end. So we will talk about what has to happen and what has to occur there as well. Okay, so let's talk about phase one, the one that's coming up in a little bit less than a month. So the first part is a bank requirement. And though this is a bank requirement, it could mean increased communication from us for clarification on files that you submitted. These new rules are being implemented to better protect all consumers and businesses from fraud. With our enhanced monitoring, we will look for anomalies that appear to be different or suspicious from your previous activity. The rules have always covered unauthorized transactions, which are transactions that are made with no knowledge to you. However, there has been some additions to that better covers you. So that would be the authorized under false pretenses. And as you can see on the screen here, those are payments that are resulting from deception, payroll redirection, vendor impersonation, and business email compromise. So basically, it's an entry that you did, but you did it to an unauthorized person that was pretending to be the rightful receiver. So those get a little trickier because we'll talk about business email compromise further in this presentation. But those would be authorized because you did them under false pretenses because you were scammed. So it's important to note that though we will have increased looks at your file, the ultimate responsibility is within your business to eliminate fraud. We are an added layer of protection for you, and we will work diligently to do that. And we'll kind of talk about what we'll do and some software updates that we have that will better protect you. But this is all about, this is kind of the first time that these rules kind of put it back on the originator to have better processes and procedures within your own business. Okay. So phase one continued. That second part that impacts you directly would be the new required company entry descriptions. So there is two specific ones that have to be used. Some people might already be using these today, and that's great, but now they are required. So now in that 10-character field that's available for you in that company entry description, it has to be in all caps, and we have to use payroll for any PPD credits that related to salary, wages, or compensation. So anything, it could be a contractor relationship, it could be something that you might not consider a traditional payroll, but you're paying someone wages for their, service. That would be a payroll. Eric will touch on it here in the FAQs, but we did confirm things such as HSA contributions that complement payroll are considered payroll. So you would have to do something for an HSA contribution if you pay those, such as payroll, and then those three remaining letters that you have could say HSA if you wanted them to. But payroll does have to be in that description. So that's aimed to reduce payroll redirection fraud, which would be if, on the receiving side, if you got a call saying, hey, or if you got an email, my account number changed at this bank. So it's aiming to eliminate that because we've seen all of these things that does happen, unfortunately. So this is aimed for the receiving bank to identify why did we all of a sudden get payroll into this account that we never had before, or it might not necessarily flag it and kick it out or return it automatically, but it's going to raise questions on that receiving end when reviewing for fraudulent activity, just like we would here on our side if we were receiving that credit. So for purchase, we don't have a ton of originators that are impacted by this, but it does impact some that use web entries for the SEC code. So those would be for consumer e-commerce purchases. They apply to online purchases of goods. So you have to think, we had a question yesterday about memberships. A membership is not a purchase of a good, so this would not apply. We would have to actually be receiving some type of good to have to use purchase. So remember, these have to be in all caps, and it is the 10-character field limit. If you are someone that is affected by this and needs some clarification, feel free to reach out to us. I did provide the NACHA link that clarifies this portion a little bit on their website. I'm not going to go into detail, but it kind of explains a little bit about how this impacts reoccurring purchases and things like that. And then that last point, the ODFI, which is the Originating Depository Financial Institution, which would be us in your case, has no obligation to verify that the word purchase or payroll for that matter is in the description. So it's really up to you to make sure that your files run smoothly. Yes, we will have increased monitoring to try to catch that, but sometimes we're not always going to know the intent or the purpose of a file. So what do you need to do for phase one? I would recommend that everybody audit and check over your existing files. Do you have any PPD payroll related files that the company entry description does not specifically state in all caps those exact words or those exact letters, payroll? If you see anything that's different or related to payroll that is questionable, if you have questions, let us know. But if you see anything, I would change that to payroll. You can do that immediately. You don't have to wait for the March deadline. You can do that today if you want to, but it has to be done by that March deadline. And then the second one, same for purchase. It would be the same thing. Go through, audit, are these happening the way that they should? So phase two occurs on June 19th. Got a little bit time, but it's coming right up. So this is as a receiving institution. So for us receiving incoming credits to our customers' accounts, we will have increased monitoring of incoming ACH credits. So though this requirement is meant for the bank to have increased monitoring, it could ultimately impact you as an originator. So say you have a payroll file that you're sending to another bank, and before they've always posted it. You may not necessarily know, but you may have a file that has an incorrect SEC code, say using CCD instead of PPD, or maybe the name on the account isn't quite what the receiving bank has on file and it doesn't match your file, or they are using, say, their spouse's account and they may not be on that at all, but it's always posted in the past. These are all reasons ultimately resulting in a return or a delay of funds posting to the receiver's account. So this would also mean sending the file needing to be corrected for the future in order for that file to go through. So how it's handled at that receiving bank is all dependent on that receiving bank's processes and procedures. But because there is a heightened awareness and a requirement to have tightened procedures, we may find that receiving banks are increasing their strict requirements, and they might kick back those inaccurate files that we've always thought were fine in the past. So it could mean increased communication from us to you or from the receiving bank to us that something needs changed in your file. So receiving banks do have the right to return things as questionable as well if they feel like something's not right, and we'll work through those things. So hopefully we won't see much impact, but I just wanted you to know we are monitoring those coming in, and then it may impact you. You may have some file changes if something doesn't post in another bank. So more on phase two, starting June 19th. So us as a bank, we have to establish processes and procedures to mitigate fraud. We've always had to do that. We've had to increase them for the March deadline. Your deadline as an originator is June 19th to have these in place for your business. So you must establish and maintain risk-based fraud monitoring processes. So the new rules remove commercially reasonable as a standard and replaces it with risk-based. It replaces a detection system with processes and procedures, and the requirements are different depending on how you operate. So meaning every business process and procedures may look different depending on your transaction risk, your volume, and your activity. So nobody's processes and procedures are going to look the same. If you need a little help of how to do that, it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be, what are you doing as a business to catch fraud before it leaves your account? How are you, having an awareness of what you could be looking at, what you could be doing different, and getting those in more of a writing. And we'll talk more about kind of those things in just a second, but there is no software required that you have to purchase. It's all just how you want to handle it as your own business. We are choosing to purchase a software on our end called Verifin, which we'll talk about in a couple slides. But that was our choice, and that's kind of enhanced monitoring for us, and we wouldn't expect that for originators. We just want you guys to have a process and procedure in place. So again, what do you need to do? You need to take this back to your business and establish a risk-based fraud detection protocol for your ACH originated transactions, subject to annual review and updating. So basically, your ensuring authorizations are retained, easy to retrieve, and consistently documented. On that too, just to be clear, for the processes and procedures that you need to implement in writing and keep as a business, you are not required to give those to us. It's not an automatic requirement. However, it's much like the debit authorizations. You are required to provide them upon request. So in an audit situation or anything like that, and we would reach out and say, hey, we need your processes and procedures, you would have to provide them to us. So it is a good idea from a compliance standpoint to make sure that these are getting done within your business annually. Even if there's not much change over year over year, you would want to mark the date that they were reviewed or make any changes accordingly. So in an ever-changing fraud world, they could change year over year, or they could have no change. Again, it goes back to your transaction risk and volume. So just wanted to note that you don't have to provide them. We are happy to give some advice and feedback if you want to talk through that. But they do need to be in place by that June deadline. And then things that, we'll talk about some things that you should consider putting in there, but you should always note in there too that you're going to implement some kind of callback procedure. We'll talk about out of band communication. If you get an email that's prompting you for a change, you should, even though it might feel awkward at first, you should always call that person or from a trusted source, trusted number, and validate, did you in fact send me this? Just wanted to validate. That's going to be the number one way of stopping fraud. So putting that in there, and then just, like I said, we'll touch on some other suggestions. Okay, so here are the suggestions. So if these are feasible for your business, we have these suggestions. Again, I know these are not going to be feasible for 100% of businesses out there with the way that they're designed and who has access, and that's okay. You can work through other solutions as well. We do believe that the first bullet point there, dual control and approve, would be the best suggestion that we could provide to mitigate that fraud risk. So if it's feasible for your business, I would recommend doing this first bullet point. This means that one person in your business submits the file, and before it's submitted to our bank to approve, another person at your company approves the file. If you would like to be set up this way and aren't, please call us or email the group on the screen here, and we will happily work through what that could mean for you. In addition to that, or not even addition to, if you just want to implement the bottom, I would recommend creating an origination calendar. We have to do that as a bank. It's not a guarantee, but it helps us just see the patterns and trends of when files are submitted. So if in your business, if a payroll file or something like that was submitted, completely out of context or whatever, it's going to help you say, whoa, usually our payroll files are submitted every other Thursday or whatever it might be. And it's gonna open up questions. It might be legitimate, but at least it would open up questions from the person submitting the file and the approver. And then have a process for accurately verifying vendor payments and any payment account changes. This is more of that vendor impersonation, which we will talk about, but this is where it's really imperative to go that extra step and validate that vendor payment or change via phone call or another source. Don't just take an email change, because those are increasingly becoming much more common, and we have definitely seen that on our end. And then if you have a source document, always confirm the total back to that source document. Some of these things sound like common sense. You might not think that this really needs to be listed in a policy or procedure, but I would recommend anything that you're doing that is mitigating fraud risk, put it in that policy or procedure. Okay. Okay, so I touched on Verifin. That is something that we are purchasing as a bank, and it's going to protect everybody, not just our business customers, but our consumers as well. So it is an AI-based software that detects hundreds of different data points of fraud. For ACH, it'll compare your previous files to the current file and detect any new account information or existing account information that has changed. It will also detect SEC code mismatches. So though there may not be anything necessarily wrong, it'll put it in a daily dashboard of alerts for us as employees to review the alert information. So you may see an increase of communication again from us to better clarify your intent of a file or a transaction. We'll be looking over alerts in the morning after the data extract. You can see those come over nightly. So it is after the fact, but it's still within a good time frame to hopefully mitigate and catch some fraud in the ACH world. Won't go into everything, but banking has a lot of different rules and a lot of different scenarios, whether it's ACH or check, in our timeframes that we have. Bottom line, we will work diligently to recoup funds and get funds back in a fraudulent situation. But the reality is there are rules and regulations out there that other banks and we have to follow, and doing anything as soon as we possibly can is ultimately the best, because ACH is pretty immediate. If those funds arrive at the receiving institution and they're withdrawn immediately, and we created that file, say we pushed out a file, and then after the fact, we're like, oh no, that was fraudulent. I was tricked. I allowed somebody in my online banking, whatever the situation might be, we can reverse that file, which is basically requesting a return to that receiving bank. But if the funds are gone because that fraudster withdrew them, they are only required to send the amount that they can. So if there's nothing left, there's nothing to send. If there's, say it was a $5,000 fraud and there's $200 left, they send back those $200. So that's the hard part about this. But by morning time right away, we are hoping that we would be able to better catch these scenarios. But for the origination fraud piece of, giving out your online credentials because you believe it's Home State Bank calling you or whatever it is, those are where your processes and procedures are going to mitigate that fraud. So Verifin does not share bank information between all of the banks they work with. So our information would never be shared with any other institutions out there. However, they do use a cloud-based system to alert based off of other banks in their network. So say we have an originator who made a fraudulent vendor payment unknowingly to, say, ABC Builders at a large bank, because that's usually where the fraudsters are banking out of. The Verifin system will alert us and say, hey, just FYI, this customer is deemed fraudulent at another bank. So it's using its vast and large network of banks to detect fraud at all institutions using Verifin. We can't see that private information, but we're getting that alert saying you might want to be careful because this account number or this routing number associated with that, this person, they have been associated with fraud. And anyway, so that's a great tool to use. We are still learning about this. We're hoping by June 2026, this will be up and running. This is not a complete stopping point for fraud for you, but it is a huge tool to help with that. And we will be learning more about that as we implement it. But it does handle all these new NACHA rules adequately. To just kind of better put it into perspective on a check side, I know this is ACH, but on a check side, they look at 300 data points on a single check alone to compare history from our account holder. So they're going to use your history and then any new check that comes through, they're looking at 300 different data points to verify, is this abnormal from the checks that were written in the past? They also use a heat map and show exactly how a check could have been whitewashed into a new fraudulent check. So it's pretty amazing technology, and we're excited to roll this out and better enhance our monitoring process. Okay, so I haven't used the word, but I've kind of touched on CATO, which is corporate account takeover. Unfortunately, we've seen this in our ACH world. It really does happen. This is where out-of-band communication, meaning verification through another source, such as phone call, is critical. So corporate account takeover is a type of business and identity theft in which cyber criminals gain control of a company's bank account by stealing employee login credentials. Once criminals have access, they can initiate wire transfers, ACH payments, or other unauthorized transactions, often draining accounts before your business even realize what happened. These attacks, typically seem harmless by clicking a phishing email, visiting a compromised website, or whatever that might be. So if you are tricked and you send that fraudulent file, just like we said minutes ago, your only option is to reverse it. And we can hope for the best, and we can hope that fraudster didn't drain the account, but we will do that. So is there anything else I'm missing? Oh, there is little recovery in vendor impersonation scams when we initiate the file. So if you initiate the file, it's debiting your account and going out because you gave your credentials to someone, or even under those false pretenses. Maybe you initiated the file because you believed you were talking to the right person and that file went out the door. There's little recovery, but if we realize what happened quickly, there's much more of a chance. So in an increasing fraud world and knowing how good these fraudsters are in their conversations, never be embarrassed if you are on the receiving end of that. Please just call us and tell us what happened. We deal with this more than I would even love to say. So we're very, very used to this, unfortunately, and we would love to help you through that. So even if you're not sure, just call us. If you do get a call and we've had this last year, we had to send out an email saying, hey, Home State Bank doesn't have a fraud department. We have people that look at fraud, but we don't have a fraud department. So if you get a call from someone saying that the Home State Bank fraud department and they need your username and password, or if anybody says they need your username and password, just hang up and call us at our trusted number on our website or online. We will validate it. And, I told the group this yesterday, even if we do call you, if I call you and I say, hey, it's Megan, I had a question, and something just doesn't quite feel right, or you're like, gosh, I really want to believe this is the bank, it's the number, it could have been spoofed, but I'm not sure. You won't offend us whatsoever if you're like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna call you right back and call us back at our main number. That's totally fine. We would actually love that. So don't be embarrassed if you want to do that. That's totally fine. So if you suspect that you are victim to corporate account takeover, do exactly what it says on the screen here. Contact us at our regular number. Stop all online banking activity from that computer. Misconception, but don't actually power off your computer. Disconnect it from the network. So take that network cable out, disconnect it. That way, get off the internet, because we will, encourage getting that computer cleaned and everything like that. And our personal banking team are very equipped to working through these situations. They've done it a lot, so they will be your experts in that. And then document everything that you can, including dates, times, and any suspicious activity, and file a report with your local law enforcement, and the FBI's IC3 at the website listed. The IC3 is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. The FBI really does use that, and they associate all the things that come in all over the nation, and they connect these crimes to be able to find these fraudsters. So it really does get used. It's an extra step, but it helps people out down the line. Okay, so a few things. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail because some of them, quite frankly, don't impact all of us as a business originator. And we've probably seen these. So the classic is phishing. That is when you get an email and it wants you to click a link. It wants you to open up an attachment. So always, even if it seems legitimate, look at that receiver's email. It's probably one letter off or one tiny little difference. Just be extra sure when opening those, because then you're downloading, malware, ransomware, virus, whatever it is on your computer. And then just call them back and say, did you send that? I know that it takes extra time, but that's going to be your most common type of attack. Imposter, where you're pretending to be someone else. A government agency is not going to ask you for your money over the phone. Hang up and call the real person back. Romance, we've probably heard of these. I'm not concerned from a business world standpoint, but just throwing that in there. And then a money mule could happen as a business standpoint. That would be where someone asks you to do a favor. Can you send this for me? Hey, you're an ACH originator, right? Can you just send these funds for me? That could be fraudulent activity or illegal activity on the backside that you don't even realize is happening. If it feels suspicious that someone's asking you to send a file, probably is. Okay, so then the remaining on this slide, deep fake. This is a new one in our AI world. Kind of scary because it really does happen, where they're using a fake video from a picture of you and your voice that they might have gotten off of your business voicemail. They're just taking a clip and they're changing it into whatever words they want. And you might get a call from quote unquote your boss to send an ACH immediately. I need to get this out to a vendor. They're waiting on payments. And it could be a Teams call or whatever that looks like in your business, where it's an actual video or an actual phone call and it really sounded like your boss. And those go out the door because, it's a rush request. That's getting a little scary because it is real and it's very convincing. Again, that's where that callback number comes in place. And even though it seems very normal day to day, I work with this person every day. And it might feel silly at first, but just calling back and saying, hey, you want me to send this much money to wherever, right? And they're gonna say, no, what are you talking about? Or, yep, that was me. So that's great. So be aware of that. That is an increasing scam. Investment, we've seen those get rich quick kind of thing. Tech support, a pop-up saying your computer has a virus. Call your real tech if you're unsure, just don't click. And then the supply chain attacks, those do happen in our world. And this is where that vendor impersonation comes in, where this is one that's very hard for us as a bank to control. We've actually had this. We can do everything as a bank to validate our customer, which is you and your identity and your information, but we have no way of validating any information that's not our customer. So this would be if you're paying an invoice and you're working with them all along and We've had it where it was business email compromise and it was intercepted and they changed the wire information, which I know we're talking ACH, that could happen, ACH. But they changed the wire information to a whole new routing and account and it wasn't caught and they thought they had validated their vendor. But it actually, they only validated via email. So they were validating to the fraudster that, yep, we're gonna send here, and it didn't actually stop that from happening. And that's very hard for us to control because we have no contact with customers that aren't ours and your vendors. So that's where, again, just that out-of-band communication, such as a callback, I know I've said that a lot, that's really gonna save you. So at this point, we're going to kind of go over some frequently asked questions, and then I'm going to leave it to Eric here, again, who's in our business online team along with Crystal, to kind of go over these, since he and Crystal deal with more of that technical side of when you call in, you're probably going to be talking to them more likely. So I will let Eric take it over.
Thanks, Megan. I do want to say before we dive into some of these FAQs that as we talk about fraud prevention, recouping funds, you've heard us say a couple times that that's not a guarantee in these instances of fraud, false pretense kind of instances. If you are already on positive pay, I know that some of you might be. That's also a really good tool that we like to sing praises of. It is kind of just another layer of security in these cases, especially in the ACH world, check world as well. It gives you very direct control, pretty plain picture of these are the things that are being debited from my account. Are they okay to be debited? Are they not okay? If that's something that you're not utilizing right now and are interested in, just feel free to reach out to us at any time. We'll get you connected with the right sources to give you a little more information, see if you want to move forward with that. So we did receive some questions on this new payroll description. Do files for HSA funds need the new payroll description? And in that case, it is a yes. It's anything wages, compensation, salary, like Megan mentioned earlier. The payroll, HSA is a payroll deduction, pre-tax component of salary, needs the payroll description. Where can I learn more about managing my ACH risk? The safety of the ACH network for all participants is really key. NACHA has a lot of risk management resources available, fraud prevention, rules compliance, things like that. We do have some links coming up from resources here at the end. You can take a look at, save if you want, always have it on hand. A lot of good information coming straight from the source there. Do the new rules require screening of every ACH entry individually? As we talk about these new processes and procedures that need to be recorded and reviewed, that may seem a little overwhelming. In this case, the answer is no. There's nothing that requires every individual ACH entry be reviewed. So we don't want to, let that seem like way too big of a task. Hey, we don't even know how we would implement something to look at every single ACH item. As we talk about scope and what is right for your own business's processes, just want to point that out. Nothing requiring that. You know what is going to be the most effective for your business. That is not something you need to take into account. What actions might Home State Bank take when potential suspect transactions are identified? We could do a variety of things when it comes to any of these transactions that we look at as maybe not legitimate. That could just be stopping any further processing of that transaction itself. We might reach out to originators to just see if any given file or item in a file are valid and intended. And we also might contact the RDFI, the receiving depository financial institution, just to make sure that everything's on the up and up there. Will files still be processed with the same timing that I'm used to? For that, the answer is yes. You're setting effective dates, as you know, whether it's for tomorrow, in some cases the same day, next week, whatever that looks like. Nothing is in all this implementation for these new rules is going to slow down anything like that, except for any maybe suspect transactions that we need to take action on. And in those cases, we're going to contact you and say, this item, this file, we are holding it, don't want it to go just yet, wanted to check it out, make sure it's valid. Outside of that, same processing windows. And then who can I contact with questions? It's really any of us that are sitting in today, Megan, myself, Crystal. There is that businessonline@hsbank.net email address. So we've touched a few times. But truly, if there's any given individual that you're used to working with here at Home State, or even just our main line, as we talked about, any questions at all, we can get answered for you. As long as you're saying, hey, these are the questions, or I have a question about this item change, you'll get routed to the right resource. Please do not hesitate in anything that comes up for these new rule changes or just our ACH fraud world in general. That's something that we want to take really seriously. So however you can reach out and get in touch with us, we'll make sure that we're getting you the answers that you're looking for. And then this is just that list of resources that we talked about, the IC3 site, NACHA's site, things like that. Gives updates on rules as they're being implemented, what's on the horizon, things like that. Good to check out and be on top of.
Great.